Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Speed Racer from 2008. When stepping into the chaotically technicolor, crazy, insane, beautifully edited, intensely cartoony, brightly colored family film that is Speed Racer, you sort of can't be prepared for everything that's going to be in it. And I don't think I even am after all the times I've seen it. There's certain movies that just want to be their own unique, crazy-ass thing. And very few family films ever do that at all. But Speed Racer manages to be one of the greatest visual feasts that a mainstream blockbuster film has done in probably all of the 2000s. It's intense, it's wild, it's crazy, it's extremely family friendly, and it comes off like an intensely inspired, hyperkinetic, caffeinated, anime-obsessed, cartoon-loving, beautiful motion picture. And it's almost kind of hard to sum it all up, because there's just so much going on, but it's all beautiful, it's all wonderful, it's all precisely put in there, but it's just all so much of an experience, it almost overpowers you into falling in love with it. And you want to love that over-the-topness. You want to love the way it's telling its story. It wraps you up in a story I'd heard 100 times the story of Racer X. All of those plot lines before, but gives it whole new life and new energy. There's never a live-action remake that somehow becomes more animated than its actual source material, that loves what that source material did to its generation and wants us to flourish in a new medium like never before. Speed Racer is a one-of-a-kind movie. There were very few live-action remakes in comparison to now, but Speed Racer outdid all of them by redefining what that could even be, and redefining it in such a way that no one has even come close to achieving what it has, bringing an animated TV show to the big screen. The first time I saw Speed Racer was an amazing experience, and it probably doesn't sound that way, but I went with Ian when we were making Knock Force, not that day, but that era, and we went to the IMAX in Lincoln Center, biggest IMAX in New York. Supposedly it's one of the biggest on the East Coast. There was not really 3D, it was pre-Avatar, this is 2008, and we went on a Monday afternoon because we were afraid if we wanted to see Speed Racer in IMAX, this is the last week we were going to get to do it, which I think was the reason. Why we didn't go that weekend, maybe we were busy, I don't know, probably making a cartoon, to be honest. But we went, we saw it, and we were just floored that the screen was all of our view was the screen of that movie, with profile shots of every actor going back and forth, with all the crazy, intensely beautiful car chases and colors and everything. It was overwhelming, it was crazy, it was all we wanted to talk about for like months and months. If you watch some of those cartoons, we refer to that movie way too much, and that was like the summer of Iron Man and The Dark Knight, but to us it was the summer of Speed Racer, because it was just this amazing experience. And sure, it was a Monday afternoon screening and it wasn't very full, but it was like in our hearts it was, a packed house, and the whole world had changed. And when I look at what the Wachoeskis did with Speed Racer, is they had all the power in the world. They'd just come off of the Matrix trilogy, all of which were successful for Warner Brothers. They produced and were very involved with V for Vendetta, but this is the first one they directed after doing the Matrix movies. So the studio was pretty much going to let them do whatever they wanted. And they get the cinematographer of the Star Wars prequels, who's obviously been working in green screen for a long time. They get an amazing crew. They get, all the money and the power in the world, and they make this. Certainly, I think the Wachowskis are known for making big auteur statements. If you look at Cloud Atlas, but if you look at even Jupiter Ascending, only a true auteur with a studio embracing them would give the Wachowskis the opportunity to make the films they have. And when I look at this film, that's sort of why I love it. It's like watching children play. It's like watching visually animation and fun be represented. And I know it wasn't necessarily the coolest film at the time. I mean, this is the summer of The Dark Knight, so a colorful, amazing Technicolor dream coat of a kids movie maybe wasn't the coolest thing, but it's sort of how intensely and rich everything is in it. A lot of kids movies are like that because, hey, I'm a kids movie, it's all colorful so kids pay attention. But in this, it's like it was purposely trying to make a cartoon with live action. There was like a million different shots that were inputted and brought into that green screen and collected and made into those shots. It was completely artificial, but animation is, artificial as well. And I think what they were trying to do with it was kind of like almost a different kind of film language in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that because I really like this movie. I really mean that. I mean, it's like there's so many different things going on in the background. I mean, this time I was really appreciating the track they're on, and in the background is basically like a flip book of a zebra running. So when you drive fast, you see a zebra running. That's an insane detail and incredibly film nerdy. I noticed they do a couple flip book things in this movie. They do a lot of intensely kind of cinephile things. The opening, for my money, the opening is the best part of the movie. When that opening happens and you're seeing that race and you're being introduced to all the characters and you're cutting back between the race and their past and what happened to the older brother Rex, it is a really intense experience, but you really feel like right after that race, you know exactly what's going on. You understand the history of Rex, you understand the history, you understand what's going on with Pops and with the mom, and you understand, the whole history of everything and how Speed feels the way he is, why Trixie feels the way she is, how their relationships are and everything, while presenting this race and how much racing is important to them, while setting all the backstories set up while they're doing a race. And one thing I really like about this film is they treat the kind of drama of Speed Racer with the same kind of intensity with the races and cut between them, and almost makes kind of the drama as intense and as action filled. And these actors like really putting in some really interesting kind of cartoony performances, and they're definitely playing these iconic characters who are already iconic at that point, but like they're also bringing their own to them. There's so much going on, but at the end of that, I feel like my heart is pounding. I'm just like, oh my god, like what is going on? Like Speed like honored his brother, family's very important to him, everything his brother represented, like all the history there, how they've grown up through this tragedy, how him and Trixie are so apart, what this racing means to him and his dad, what it has done to their family, both pro and con, everything. And you're there, you're in it, you get it. And it is just such a smart opening scene because you get the visual sensibilities of it. It's cutting really quickly. It's using the cars moving to use those transitions. It's actually very clear. If after like over 10 years of watching this movie, it feels clear, it takes a while. It's like so intense that I can understand when people say I feel like lost, and like trust me, there's times I've watched it that you do almost feel lost, but there's like a preciseness. You really watch the cutting and the camera moves with the cars, and the cars move back and forth and everything like that, that what they're doing and how they're cutting between the past and the present and showing you and catching you up with everything that's going on in Speed Racer. And that is, oh boy, that's just so beautiful, that opening sequence. It's maybe one of the best sequences they've ever done, the Wachowskis, because it shows you how good they are at doing these kind of, I don't know how good they are at special effects, but also how good they are at understanding both the drama and the plot and the setting of Speed Racer. And there is so much visual sensibility of it, and there is so much visually in awe of this whole thing, but I think it is really about the story, and the story is the famous Racer X story, basically. And it does feel a little more episodic, but, that is Speed Racer in a lot of ways, but I think the flow of it works really well within, like, you kind of get the show. Now, granted, I think one of the things about the Speed Racer movie is that it does feel a little long. It's like an over 2 hour kids movie, which, again, only a massive auteur like the Wachowskis could even, attempt to let Warner Brothers release something like that. And maybe in the middle it does feel a little like that, but towards the end, it's really like they're throwing everything in the kitchen sink at this movie. I remember watching this clip, and I've never found it since, but it's kind of stuck in my mind that Stephen Colbert said he saw Speed Racer, and it's like being stuck in a dryer on spin cycle with a bunch of fireworks, and it does feel that way a lot, but that is able to like sort of get me through a lot of it, and it does go by really quickly, maybe because I love this movie so much. But I will say it is a little bit long. It could have been an intense little like 90 minutes or something like that, but I sort of love it for all its kind of imperfections and the weirdness of what it is, because we don't get movies like this. Like, we just don't. Maybe Popeye by Robert Altman's like the closest comparison, but I think Speed Racer is in its own, because there's only really one movie sort of made like that. Like, maybe the Spy Kids movie sort of, but not to this like decadence in terms of everything that's going on within it. I used to think it's a film film is trying to be animation, and I think that's true to a certain degree, but it's also trying to be its own kind of live action film, and live action family films are mostly awful and not directed very well, and this is just like someone who really cares about making a live action kind of family film, you know, between like all like the cooties stuff to like that kid. Why does he have a 1930s like Irish New York accent? Like, I never got the thing with that kid. Like that kid is so weird to me. I just don't like, why does he talk like that? Like, this movie has so much going on, you kind of let it go, but then when you think about it later, you're like, why did they have a kid who sounds like his dad's an Irish cop and it's like 1932? I don't get that, but whatever, it's fine. There is so much going on. I do remember, like, maybe because I was a kid when I watched Speed Racer, Chim being a bigger part of it, but I do like that they have a real monkey. I love, you know, John Goodman and Susan Sarandon. I think very well cast. Like, Richard Roundtree has a cameo. I actually like Emile Hirsch in this. He's able to make Speed Racer his own. He's not, again, they're playing the characters, but they're doing their own spin on it. Even Matthew Fox, I know, gets a lot of shit for Racer X, but I quite like him as Racer X. I think he does a decent job, as well as Christina Ricci as Trixie. I don't really dislike anybody in this movie. I think, you know, it's very loud and broad, and it's hard to play that, and I think a lot of these actors are able to kind of sift through it. It looks like, and I've always heard, they had a lot of fun making it, and I think there's a lot of love in this movie. There's a lot of love of animation and what Speed Racer was and what anime is, and the legacy of all of that and how that's gotten us to where we are. I also think there's a genuineness that goes through this entire film, because it genuinely wants to be this kind of different, beautiful, intensely, uniquely colorful movie. And that's the whole thing about Speed, the whole movie. Like, he wants racing to be genuine. He wants racing to represent what it means to him. He wants it to be that love of racing. It's not about all the grown-up bullshit. It's about making something and doing something awesome. And this time I watched Speed Racer, I thought a lot about that, actually, because that's kind of this movie. Like, I think a lot of times, not that every film is made by like committee or a studio saying yes, and I don't believe that, but I think there's a certain degree where you know you can't go as full tilt into that when you get older, because it's just too hard, it's too impossible. But the Wachowskis just did it, and were amazing at it, and were able to make that kind of Speed Racer movie that no one could have dreamed would be this way. It's an amazing, awesome, sort of underrated film, because there is only one film like it. It drove past everyone to such a degree. You know, the Marvel Universe was starting at the time. Iron Man came out like a week before. All these big things were going on with Blockbuster. And Speed Racer turned left and just went off into the stratosphere. And with fireworks blazing in the background, chose to be its own way. And I love it for being that. And I'll always love it for being that, because that was an experience I'll never forget. And it's a movie I can never really get past, because of how kinetic and beautiful and colorful and crazy it really is. And while doing that, while being a family film, is sort of kind of the most different and interesting thing about it, because I think they proved you can make an auteur family film. It's just maybe no one else was ready for it. But when I'm watching Speed Racer, I don't really care if anyone else is ready for it. I think I'm always going to be ready for Speed Racer. So if you've seen Speed Racer and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.